The biblical concept of redemption is about buying back an enslaved person. Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion, and today we tend to think of the concepts of redemption and redeeming as having to do with liberating someone or setting someone free, but that's actually a very incomplete picture of the concept as it's represented in the Bible. In both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, it fundamentally has to do with repurchasing, redeeming, or buying back enslaved people who have been sold or in some way lost to another master. And we see it most clearly in the literature that's commenting on the return from exile in the Hebrew Bible. So Deutero-Isaiah is where it shines most clearly. For instance, in Isaiah 48:20, it says that God has redeemed his slave Jacob. And this is a reference to the conceptualization of the exile as Israel being sold to another slave master. And then the return from exile is God redeeming, buying back their enslaved people from that other master. And in Klaus Baltzer's Hermeneia commentary volume on Deutero-Isaiah, he comments, "The slave who has been sold by his master because of some misdemeanor will be bought back and readmitted to the relationship of protection and service." That is redemption. So there is a liberation, but it is a liberation from an oppressive slave master back to a more merciful and just slave master. And this is even more explicit in the New Testament, where instead of a conceptual framework for understanding return from exile, it's all about sin. So you are enslaved to sin, and then God redeems you by buying you back from sin. So in Romans 6:22, for instance, we read, "But now that you are freed from sin and enslaved to God, the fruit you have is for sanctification, and the end is eternal life." In 1 Corinthians 7:22, Paul insists that a free person who was called by God to follow Jesus is a slave to Christ. And then in the very next verse, we are told that you are bought with a price. So the idea of redemption, as it's represented in the Hebrew Bible and in the New Testament, is based on this metaphor of us being bought back by God to free us from an oppressive slave master so that now we can be enslaved to a more merciful and just slave master. It is only post-biblically that we renegotiated that concept to make it more about liberation and freedom. And the fit for this video has been the Burros of Berea podcast. These folks very kindly flew me out to North Carolina, just outside of Asheville, last month to interview me for a couple of podcast episodes that are going to air soon. They're struggling right now, as are most of the folks in that part of the country, and so I highly recommend that you support this podcast in whatever way you can, and if you have the ability to contribute to cleanup and relief efforts in the eastern United States, I hope you will do so.